The mahogany walls of Courtroom 7 in the King County Family Court had absorbed 20 years of tears, shouting matches, and broken promises. Judge Margaret Rivera had presided over them all. She'd seen parents fight over children like possessions, witnessed addicts make promises they couldn't keep, and watched social workers burn out trying to save families that didn't want saving. But nothing, absolutely nothing, in her 2 decades on the bench had prepared her for Emma Clark. The child sat perfectly still in the 3rd row, a porcelain doll in a world of chaos. 3 years old, maybe 30 pounds soaking wet, with blonde curls that someone had carefully brushed that morning. Her foster mother, Linda Martinez, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and worn hands, sat beside her, occasionally reaching over to adjust Emma's blue cotton dress or offer her a sip of water from a small pink cup. Emma never took the water. She never moved unless someone physically repositioned her. What unsettled Margaret most was the rabbit. It was a stuffed toy that had clearly seen better days, one ear torn, the white fur dingy gray from constant handling, a missing button eye replaced with what looked like a shirt button sewn on with red thread. Emma's small fingers were locked around its neck in a death grip that turned her knuckles white. The rabbit was her lifeline, her anchor to a reality she seemed desperate to escape. Margaret shuffled the papers on her desk, trying to focus on the case file, but her eyes kept drifting back to Emma. 6 weeks, 42 days since Seattle police found her wandering Highway 99 at 2 o'clock in the morning, and the child hadn't spoken a single word. Not to the paramedics who wrapped her in blankets, not to the nurses who treated her for hypothermia and dehydration, not to the crisis counselor who spent 3 hours trying to coax any response from her. Not to Linda, who had taken her into a home already filled with 2 other foster children. Complete selective silence. "Your Honor, if we may continue." The voice belonged to Robert Chen, Sarah Clark's attorney, no relation to Dr. James Chen, the child psychologist scheduled to testify. Robert was young, maybe 30, with the idealistic fire of someone who still believed the system could work. He stood at the plaintiff's table, a stack of rehabilitation certificates and character references spread before him like a winning poker hand. "Proceed, Mr. Chen." Margaret's voice was measured, professional, betraying none of the turmoil churning in her gut. Across the aisle sat Sarah Clark, 28 years old but looking closer to 40, with the hollow cheeks and prematurely aged skin that marked her years of substance abuse. She wore a simple black dress, probably borrowed, and her hands twisted a tissue into confetti beneath the table. Every few seconds, Sarah's eyes would dart to Emma, desperate and pleading, searching for any flicker of recognition from her daughter. Emma never looked back. It was as if Sarah didn't exist. Margaret had read Sarah's file so many times she'd memorized the timeline. First arrest at 19, possession of methamphetamine. Second arrest at 22, possession with intent to distribute. Emma was born when Sarah was 25, during a brief period of sobriety that lasted exactly 14 months. Then came the relapse, the eviction, the spiral. The case file documented 3 different CPS interventions, each one promising change, each one ending in disappointment. But this time, Robert insisted, was different. "Your Honor, my client has completed a 90-day inpatient rehabilitation program at Fairview Recovery Center." Robert lifted a certificate with a gold seal. "She's maintained sobriety for 112 days. She's passed 14 consecutive drug screenings. She has secured employment at Morrison's Grocery on 15th Avenue, where she works 35 hours per week as a stock clerk. She's completed court-mandated parenting classes with a 98% attendance record." Margaret watched Sarah as her attorney spoke. The woman was crying silently, tears streaming down her face, her lips moving in what might have been a prayer or a plea. Beside her, Robert continued building his case with the enthusiasm of someone who hadn't yet learned that paperwork and reality were often very different things. "Additionally, Your Honor, my client has secured a 2-bedroom apartment in the Greenwood neighborhood, passed inspection by CPS, and has established a support network through her Narcotics Anonymous sponsor and her church community at Grace Lutheran. She is ready, more than ready, to be reunited with her daughter. Mr. Patterson, Margaret turned to the state's attorney, David Patterson, a grizzled veteran in his 50s who'd seen every variation of this story. Unlike Robert, David had stopped believing in fairy tale endings years ago. David stood slowly, deliberately. Your Honor, the state acknowledges Ms. Clark's recent efforts. However, we must prioritize Emma's welfare above the mother's desire for reunification. The child has suffered severe psychological trauma. She hasn't spoken in 6 weeks. According to Dr. Chen's preliminary evaluation, he lifted a thick report. Emma is experiencing selective mutism as a trauma response. The night in question left scars we're only beginning to understand. Margaret glanced at the psychologist, Dr. James Chen, sitting in the gallery. He was a respected expert, had testified in her court a dozen times. He gave a solemn nod, confirming the severity of Emma's condition. Emma was found wandering a major highway at 2 in the morning, Your Honor, barefoot, in November, in freezing rain. She was alone for hours, possibly longer. We don't know what she witnessed, what she experienced, or how deeply she's been damaged. Reunification at this stage could re-traumatize her. The state recommends continued foster care with therapeutic intervention. The courtroom fell silent except for Sarah's quiet sobbing. Margaret looked at Emma again. The child hadn't moved, hadn't blinked, hadn't acknowledged that her entire future was being decided 15 feet away from where she sat. What are you thinking, little one? Margaret wondered. What happened that night? What did you see? What are you too terrified to say? The judge had made hundreds of custody decisions, but this one felt different. This one felt like standing at the edge of a cliff in the fog, knowing one wrong step could send someone plummeting into darkness. We'll hear from Dr. Chen, Margaret announced, her voice heavy with the weight of what was to come. And then we'll decide this child's fate. But neither the judge nor anyone else in that courtroom could have predicted what would happen 1 week later, when a police dog walked through those mahogany doors and changed everything. November 12th started like any other day in the Mountain View apartments on Seattle's north side. Sarah Clark kissed Emma goodbye that morning, promising they'd make pancakes for dinner. It was a promise she'd break, like so many others before it. The security camera in the apartment building's hallway captured everything. The footage would later be played in court, each frame a knife twisting in Sarah's gut. At 11:47 p.m., the camera showed Sarah stumbling out of apartment 2C, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. She'd been clean for 4 months, 112 days of sobriety that evaporated the moment her old friend Marcus showed up with a glass pipe and empty promises. Inside the apartment, 3-year-old Emma sat on the worn couch, still wearing her pajamas with the pink elephants. She'd fallen asleep waiting for those pancakes that never came. When she woke up at midnight, the apartment was dark, silent, empty. "Mama," Emma's voice was small in the darkness. She climbed off the couch, her bare feet padding across the cold linoleum. "Mama." The apartment wasn't large, just a living room, kitchenette, 1 bedroom, and a bathroom. Emma checked every room, her stuffed rabbit clutched tight against her chest. Her mother wasn't there. For the first time in her short life, Emma was completely alone. What happened next, investigators would piece together from various sources. Emma, terrified and confused, did what any child might do. She tried to find her mother. The deadbolt on the apartment door was old, loose. Emma had watched Sarah turn it hundreds of times. Standing on her tiptoes, the little girl managed to twist the lock. The door swung open. The hallway was empty, lit by flickering fluorescent lights that hummed like angry wasps. Emma stepped out, clutching her rabbit. She walked to the elevator. She'd been in it before, though never alone. The button glowed when she pressed it. The doors opened with a mechanical groan that echoed in the empty corridor. Ground floor, the lobby, the heavy glass door that led outside. This was where Emma should have stopped. where a 3-year-old's fear of the dark, of the unknown, should have sent her crying back upstairs. But Emma wasn't thinking clearly. Her mama was gone. She had to find her mama. The November night hit her like a slap. Rain came down in sheets, cold and relentless. The temperature had dropped to 38 degrees. Emma wore only thin cotton pajamas, no coat, no shoes, no protection from the elements. But she walked forward anyway, her small silhouette disappearing into the rain-soaked darkness. Highway 99 ran 2 blocks from the apartment complex. It was a major arterial road, 6 lanes of traffic even at midnight. Somehow, impossibly, Emma made her way there. Did she follow the sound, the lights? No one would ever know. What mattered was that at 1:47 a.m., exactly 2 hours after Sarah left, Emma was walking along the shoulder of Highway 99, soaked to the bone, her lips turning blue from hypothermia. Michael Torres had been driving trucks for 23 years. He'd seen deer on highways, drunk pedestrians, once even a cow that had escaped from a farm. But when his headlights caught the small figure in pink pajamas walking along the shoulder, his heart nearly stopped. Jesus Christ, he breathed, slamming on his brakes. His dashcam recorded everything. The footage would later go viral, shared millions of times with captions like "Miracle on Highway 99" and "Guardian Angel Saves Toddler." In the video, Emma appears first as just a small shape in the rain. As Michael's truck gets closer, the shape resolves into a child, impossibly small, impossibly alone, walking steadily forward like a tiny zombie. Michael pulled onto the shoulder, hazard lights flashing. He grabbed his phone and dialed 911 with shaking hands. 911, what's your emergency? There's a kid on Highway 99. A baby, maybe 3 years old, walking alone in the rain, northbound near 145th Street. Sir, can you confirm a child, alone? Yes, she's soaked, oh my God, she just sat down on the ground, she's not moving. You need to send someone now. By the time Michael got out of his truck and approached her, Emma had collapsed onto the muddy shoulder. She was conscious but unresponsive, her eyes open but unseeing, her small body shaking violently from the cold. Michael draped his jacket over her and stayed by her side, talking softly, praying under his breath. Officer Lisa Martinez was the first to arrive, her K-9 partner Bella in the back of the patrol car. Lisa had responded to hundreds of calls in her 8 years on the force, but nothing like this. When she saw Emma, tiny, soaked, shivering, she felt rage and heartbreak collide in her chest. "Hey, sweetie. Hey, baby girl, you're okay now, you're safe." Lisa wrapped Emma in an emergency blanket from her trunk. The child didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge Lisa's presence. Her eyes stared at nothing. That's when Bella began to whine from the patrol car. The German shepherd could sense distress, could feel the child's fear. Lisa made a decision. She opened the back door and Bella jumped out, moving immediately to Emma's side. The dog lay down next to the little girl, pressing her warm body against Emma's cold one. For 20 minutes, while they waited for paramedics, Bella didn't move. The dog's body heat combined with the emergency blanket likely saved Emma's life. Hypothermia had already set in. Another 30 minutes, the doctors would later say, and the outcome would have been very different. Detective Marcus Washington arrived just as the ambulance pulled up. He looked at the scene, the tiny child, the dog pressed against her, the trucker standing nearby with tears streaming down his face, and knew this case would haunt him forever. "Where are her parents?" he asked. That question would take 2 more days to answer. They eventually found Sarah Clark in Marcus's apartment on the other side of town, unconscious from an overdose, completely unaware that her daughter had nearly died searching for her. Emma never cried, never spoke, never made a sound. The doctors called it a miracle that she survived. But Emma's silence told a different story, one of a nightmare that words couldn't express. 3 weeks after Emma was found on Highway 99, Sarah Clark woke up in a hospital bed with Detective Marcus Washington sitting beside her. The first words out of her mouth were, "Where's my baby?" Marcus's expression told her everything. The disappointment, the anger, the pity. "She's safe, no thanks to you." Sarah would later describe that moment as her rock bottom, lower than any high, deeper than any addiction. The look in that detective's eyes, like she was garbage, like she was something less than human, finally broke through the fog. She'd almost killed her daughter. Not directly, not intentionally, but almost killed her all the same. That was 90 days ago. Now standing in Judge Rivera's courtroom, Sarah Clark looked like a different person. Her attorney, Robert Chen, had worked miracles. Or rather, Sarah had worked miracles and Robert was simply presenting the evidence. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit A through M for the record." Robert's voice carried the confidence of someone holding a royal flush. He approached the bench with a folder thick with documentation. "These represent my client's comprehensive rehabilitation over the past 3 months." Judge Rivera accepted the folder, flipping through page after page. Fairview Recovery Center's completion certificate, 14 consecutive clean drug tests from an independent laboratory, pay stubs from Morrison's Grocery showing steady employment, a lease agreement for a 2-bedroom apartment, certificates from parenting classes, anger management courses, financial literacy workshops, letters of recommendation from her sponsor, her employer, her pastor at Grace Lutheran Church. On paper, Sarah Clark was a success story, a phoenix rising from ashes. "Additionally, Your Honor," Robert continued, warming to his presentation, "my client has attended individual therapy twice weekly with Dr. Patricia Morgan, a licensed clinical psychologist specializing in addiction recovery. Dr. Morgan has provided a letter stating that Ms. Clark has made remarkable progress and poses no danger to herself or others." Sarah sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap. She'd learned in rehab that stillness conveyed stability, that fidgeting suggested instability. Every movement was calculated now, every word measured. She was performing the role of recovered addict with everything she had because it was the only way to get Emma back. But as Robert spoke, Sarah's eyes kept drifting to the third row. To Emma, to her baby girl who looked at her like she was a stranger, worse than a stranger, like she was invisible. David Patterson, the state's attorney, rose slowly when his turn came. He'd been doing this job too long to be impressed by paperwork. "Your Honor, Mr. Chen has presented compelling documentation of Ms. Clark's recent behavior. The state acknowledges these positive steps. However, we must address the elephant in the room." He turned, gesturing toward Emma. Every eye in the courtroom followed. "That child hasn't spoken in 6 weeks. Not one word. Dr. James Chen's evaluation, which I'm submitting as Exhibit 1 for the state, indicates severe psychological trauma consistent with prolonged exposure to life-threatening circumstances. Emma Clark wandered alone in freezing rain for approximately 2 hours. She experienced hypothermia. She nearly died, and the cause of this trauma sits at the plaintiff's table." Sarah flinched as if slapped. Robert put a steadying hand on her arm. "The state's position is clear," Patterson continued. "Ms. Clark may have completed 90 days of rehabilitation, but addiction is a lifelong battle. Relapse is common. Research shows that 40 to 60% of individuals relapse within the first year. Can we risk Emma's safety on those odds? Can we place a traumatized, nonverbal 3-year-old back into the care of someone who abandoned her to pursue drugs?" "Your Honor, that's inflammatory and prejudicial," Robert began, but Margaret held up her hand. "I'll decide what's prejudicial, Mr. Chen." The judge looked at Sarah directly. "Ms. Clark, do you have anything to say?" This was the moment. Sarah had rehearsed it 1,000 times with Robert, practiced in front of mirrors, but now her carefully prepared speech evaporated. Instead, raw desperation poured out. "I know what I did. I know I don't deserve another chance." Sarah's voice cracked. "I left my baby alone. I chose drugs over her. I almost killed her. There's no excuse, no explanation that makes it okay, but I'm not that person anymore. I wake up every morning and the first thing I think about is Emma. The last thing I think about before I sleep is Emma. She's why I stayed in rehab when I wanted to leave. She's why I go to numb meetings even when I'm tired. She's why I'm still clean." Tears streamed down Sarah's face, and for once she didn't try to hide them. "Please, I'm begging you. Give me a chance to prove I can be the mother she deserves." Judge Rivera's expression was unreadable. She'd heard variations of this speech 100 times. Some mothers kept their promises. Most didn't. How could she know which category Sarah fell into? "Your Honor," Robert interjected, "if I may suggest a graduated reunification plan. Supervised visits initially, with regular drug testing and welfare checks. If Ms. Clark maintains sobriety and Emma shows positive response, we could progress to overnight visits, then eventual full custody." "The state opposes any reunification at this time," Patterson countered. "Emma needs stability and safety, not to be a guinea pig in her mother's recovery experiment." Margaret was about to call a recess when Sarah suddenly stood up. "Wait, please, Your Honor, I have one more thing." Robert looked alarmed. This wasn't in the script. "Sarah." "There's something that happened last week," Sarah spoke quickly, desperately. "Linda, Emma's foster mother, she let me have a supervised visit at her house. Emma wouldn't look at me the whole time. She just sat there with her rabbit, staring at nothing. But then a TV commercial came on, for the Seattle Police Department. It showed police dogs doing training exercises." Sarah's voice grew stronger. Emma looked up. She watched those dogs, and Your Honor, she smiled. Just for a second, but she smiled. It was the first expression I'd seen on her face in 6 weeks. The courtroom was completely silent. "I did research. I found out that the night Emma was found, a police dog stayed with her, kept her warm. Maybe seeing that dog again." Sarah's voice broke. "Your Honor, I'm asking for something unusual. Could you bring a police dog to the next hearing? Maybe if Emma sees one, maybe she'll respond. Maybe she'll show us what she needs. Please. I'll accept any decision you make, but let her tell us, in whatever way she can, what she wants." Judge Rivera stared at Sarah for a long moment. This was highly irregular, unprecedented even, but something in Sarah's desperation felt genuine, and Emma's smile, if it really happened, was the first breakthrough anyone had reported. "I'll take this under advisement," Margaret finally said. "We'll reconvene in 1 week. Mr. Chen, prepare a formal motion regarding your client's request. Mr. Patterson, prepare your opposition. This court is adjourned." As the gavel fell, Sarah collapsed into her chair, emotionally spent. She'd played her last card. Now all she could do was wait and pray that a dog might succeed where she had failed, reaching her silent, broken daughter. Officer Rex Hawthorne was finishing his shift report when Sergeant Linda Walsh dropped a manila envelope on his desk. "You're not going to believe this one," she said with a smirk. "Court summons. For Shadow." Rex looked up from his computer screen, confused. "What?" "Family court wants you to bring Shadow to a custody hearing. Something about a traumatized kid." Linda shrugged. "Admin approved it. You're up." Rex opened the envelope and pulled out the official court order. His eyes scanned the document quickly. Clark v. State of Washington. 3-year-old child. Selective mutism. Therapeutic presence of K9 unit requested. Attached was a 2-page summary of the case that made his stomach turn. Emma Clark, found on Highway 99, November 12th, that was his shift. Rex's hand started shaking. He remembered that night with crystal clarity. He'd been at a different call, domestic disturbance on 175th, when the radio chatter exploded. "All units, we have a report of a juvenile on Highway 99, possibly injured. Northbound lanes near 145th. Lisa Martinez had been closest, had taken the call. By the time Rex cleared his scene and drove past, the highway was lit up with emergency vehicles, an ambulance pulling away, and Lisa standing in the rain with Bella pressed against her legs. "You okay?" he'd asked through his window. Lisa had looked at him with haunted eyes. 3 years old, Rex. She was 3 years old, alone on the highway. What kind of monster does that to a kid? Now reading the case file, Rex had his answer. Not a monster, just an addict. A mother who'd made the worst possible choice at the worst possible time. He kept reading, each detail worse than the last. Emma's silence, the hypothermia, the trauma, the fact that she'd smiled only once when she saw a police dog on television. Rex, Linda was still standing there. You okay with this? I know it's weird, but… I'll do it. Rex's voice was firm. When? Next Tuesday, 10 a.m., King County Family Court. After Linda left, Rex sat alone in the bullpen, the file open in front of him. Around him, the night shift was winding down, officers joking, complaining about paperwork, planning their days off. Normal sounds of normal lives. But Rex couldn't stop staring at Emma's photo, clipped to the front of the file. Those eyes, empty, haunted, old in a way no 3-year-old should ever look. Rex had a daughter. Mia was 7 now, living with his ex-wife in Tacoma. The divorce had been amicable enough, shift work and marriage didn't mix well. But he saw Mia every other weekend, and those weekends were the best part of his life. He couldn't imagine Mia at 3 years old, wandering alone in the dark. Couldn't imagine her silent and broken. The thought made him physically ill. He picked up his phone and dialed Lisa Martinez's number. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice groggy. This better be good, Hawthorne. I just got to sleep. The highway baby, Emma Clark, you remember her? Silence, then, I'll never forget her. They want me to bring Shadow to her custody hearing. Something about therapy, getting her to respond. Tell me about that night. He heard Lisa take a deep breath. It was the worst call of my career, Rex. When I got there, she was just sitting, in the rain. This trucker was standing over her with a jacket, trying to keep her dry, but she was already soaked through. Her lips were blue. She was shaking so hard I thought she was having a seizure. And Bella. Bella went straight to her. You know how she is with kids, she's got that instinct. I didn't even have to command her. She just lay down next to Emma and stayed there. The kid didn't react, didn't pet her, didn't acknowledge her at all. But I swear, Rex, after a few minutes, Emma leaned into Bella, just slightly, like she was drawing warmth not just from Bella's body but from her presence. The file says Emma smiled when she saw a police dog on TV. Then maybe it worked. Maybe Bella got through to her when nothing else could. Lisa paused. Are you going to do it? Yeah, I'm going to do it. Shadow's good with kids. He'll know what to do. After hanging up, Rex walked down to the K9 kennels. Shadow was in his run, resting on his elevated bed. The moment the German Shepherd saw Rex, his tail began to wag, his whole body wiggling with excitement. At 4 years old, Shadow was in his prime, 75 pounds of muscle, intelligence, and loyalty. They'd been partners for 3 years, and Rex trusted Shadow more than most people he knew. Hey boy. Rex unlocked the kennel and sat down on the concrete floor. Shadow immediately pressed against him, his dark eyes searching Rex's face. We've got a special job next week. A little girl who needs help. Shadow tilted his head, listening. Rex had long since stopped questioning whether his dog actually understood English. Shadow's perceptiveness went beyond training. It was almost supernatural. The dog could read scenes, sense tension, detect fear or aggression before it escalated. In 3 years of partnership, Shadow had found over 200 drug caches and had never once bitten a suspect. He was firm but gentle, powerful but controlled. Exactly what Emma might need. She's been hurt, buddy. She can't talk. Everyone's failed her, her mom, the system, everyone. But maybe you can reach her. Maybe she'll trust you when she can't trust people. Shadow licked Rex's hand, then rested his head on Rex's knee. They sat like that for a long time, officer and dog, in the quiet kennel with fluorescent lights humming overhead. That night Rex couldn't sleep. He lay in his small apartment, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Emma. He'd never met her but already felt responsible for her. Maybe it was because he had a daughter. Maybe it was because he'd been a cop long enough to see too many broken children. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe he just wanted to help because helping was what he'd sworn to do. At 3 a.m., Rex got up and started researching. He read everything he could find about selective mutism, childhood trauma, animal-assisted therapy. He watched videos of therapy dogs working with traumatized children. He made notes, highlighted passages, created a plan. The next morning, Rex called the K-9 unit's training coordinator, Officer Mike Sullivan. "I need to prep Shadow for a special assignment. Therapy work with a traumatized child. Can we run some scenarios?" "Therapy? Shadow's a narcotics dog, not a golden retriever." "I know what he is. Can we do it or not?" Mike sighed. "Yeah, we can do it. Give me 2 days to set something up." For the next week, Rex and Shadow trained differently. Instead of drug detection drills, they practiced being calm around children. Rex brought in friends' kids, had them approach Shadow, touch him, even climb on him. Shadow, to his credit, was perfect, patient, gentle, allowing small hands to grab his ears or tail without even a hint of irritation. "He's a natural," Mike observed during one session. "Some dogs are born for this." On Monday night, the evening before the hearing, Rex gave Shadow an extra-long grooming session. He brushed the German Shepherd's coat until it gleamed, trimmed his nails, cleaned his teeth. Shadow tolerated all of it with the patience of a saint, seeming to understand that something important was happening. "Tomorrow we're going to meet Emma," Rex said quietly, working the brush through Shadow's thick fur. "She's going to be scared. She might not even look at you, but we're going to try, okay? We're going to give her a chance to feel safe again." Shadow's tail thumped against the grooming table. Rex looked into his partner's intelligent brown eyes and felt a strange certainty settle over him. This wasn't just another assignment. This wasn't just another day on the job. Tomorrow, in that courtroom, something important was going to happen. He could feel it the same way Shadow could sense a hidden drug cache, instinct and experience combining into knowledge. "We've got this, boy," Rex whispered. "We're going to help her." Shadow leaned into him and Rex felt the solid warmth of absolute loyalty. Whatever happened tomorrow, they'd face it together. Officer and dog, partners, friends. Heroes if Emma would let them be. Tuesday morning arrived with gray Seattle rain pattering against the courthouse windows. Rex Hawthorne stood in the parking garage, taking deep breaths, while Shadow sat perfectly still beside him. The German Shepherd wore his official K-9 vest and Rex was in full uniform. They'd done this 1,000 times, entered buildings, faced crowds, maintained composure under pressure. But today felt different. "You ready, boy?" Rex asked, his hand resting on Shadow's head. Shadow looked up at him with those intelligent brown eyes and gave a single, soft bark. "Ready." They entered through security, drawing immediate attention. Courthouse regulars were used to seeing police officers, but a K-9 unit was unusual in family court. A young attorney nearly dropped her briefcase. A clerk stopped mid-conversation to stare. Shadow ignored them all, his focus entirely on Rex, waiting for direction. Courtroom 7 was on the 3rd floor. As they walked down the hallway, Rex's radio crackled with routine traffic from patrol units across the city. He turned the volume down. This wasn't that kind of assignment. This required silence, patience, something softer than what he usually provided. Judge Rivera's bailiff, Thomas Jefferson, yes, that was really his name, met them outside the courtroom. He was a heavy-set man in his 60s with a grandfather's kind face. "Officer Hawthorne, the judge wanted me to brief you. We've cleared space for you and your dog near the witness stand. You won't testify unless specifically called. Your presence is purely for the child's benefit." "Understood." Rex glanced through the courtroom door's narrow window. "Has she arrived yet?" "About 20 minutes ago. 3rd row left side. She hasn't moved." Rex's chest tightened. "Let's do this." When the courtroom doors opened and Rex entered with Shadow, it was like someone had pressed pause on a movie. Every head turned. Sarah Clark's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening with desperate hope. Her attorney, Robert Chen, leaned forward with interest. David Patterson, the state's attorney, frowned slightly. This was highly irregular, and he clearly didn't approve. But Rex wasn't looking at any of them. He was looking at Emma. The little girl sat between her foster mother Linda and a woman Rex assumed was a social worker. Emma wore a yellow dress. Someone had tried to make her look cheerful, which made the emptiness in her eyes even more heartbreaking. Her blonde curls were pulled back with a small clip, and clutched against her chest, like a shield, was that threadbare rabbit from the case file photos. Emma didn't look at Shadow, didn't look at Rex, didn't look at anything, really. Her gaze was fixed on some point in the middle distance, seeing something none of them could see, probably replaying that night. That endless, terrifying night on the highway. "Officer Hawthorne, please take position near the witness stand," Judge Rivera instructed from the bench. Her tone was professional, but Rex caught something else underneath, skepticism mixed with desperate hope. She didn't really believe this would work, but she was willing to try. Rex guided Shadow to the designated spot about 15 feet from where Emma sat, close enough to be visible, far enough not to be threatening. Shadow lay down on command, his posture relaxed but alert, the perfect professional. "Thank you, officer. We'll proceed with testimony." Judge Rivera shuffled papers. "Dr. Chen, please take the stand." Dr. James Chen, the child psychologist, was sworn in and began his testimony. Rex had read his report, but hearing it spoken aloud was worse. Emma presents with classic symptoms of selective mutism triggered by severe trauma. She's non-responsive to verbal stimuli, shows no interest in play or social interaction, and demonstrates signs of dissociation consistent with PTSD in young children. The testimony droned on, technical terms, clinical observations, statistics about childhood trauma and recovery timelines. Rex tried to focus, but his attention kept drifting to Emma. The child hadn't moved an inch, hadn't even blinked as far as he could tell. Shadow shifted slightly, adjusting his position. The movement was subtle, but Rex felt it through the leash. His partner was alert to something. "Dr. Chen," Judge Rivera interjected, "in your professional opinion, would reunification with the mother be detrimental to Emma's recovery?" "Your Honor, at this stage, any major change could be detrimental. Emma needs stability, consistency, and extensive therapeutic intervention before." Shadow's ears perked up. Rex felt the dog's muscles tense beneath his hand. Something had changed. Shadow had detected something, not drugs, not danger, but something else. Something human and intangible that only a dog could sense. Rex followed Shadow's gaze and felt his breath catch. Emma was looking at them. Not directly, not obviously, but her head had tilted slightly, her empty stare shifting from that middle distance to somewhere closer, somewhere dog-shaped. "Officer Hawthorne," Judge Rivera's voice cut through his observation, "is there a problem?" "No, Your Honor." Shadow's just sensing the room. The judge nodded and returned to questioning Dr. Chen, but Rex kept watching Emma. The little girl's fingers, which had been locked in a death grip around her rabbit, loosened slightly, just a fraction. Her lips, pressed together in a tight line, parted slightly. Not to speak, Rex wasn't expecting that miracle, but as if she was about to say something, as if words were forming somewhere deep inside. Shadow made a low sound in his throat. Not a whine, not a growl, but something in between. A question. "Do you see her too? Do you see her coming back?" "Easy boy," Rex whispered. "Let her come to you, don't push." But Shadow wasn't pushing. If anything, the dog was being completely still, allowing Emma to observe him without pressure. It was masterful, intuitive. Shadow understood this assignment better than Rex did. Another witness took the stand, a social worker named Patricia Hernandez who'd been monitoring Sarah's progress. She testified about home visits, drug tests, therapy sessions. Important information that everyone in the courtroom was supposed to be paying attention to. But Rex couldn't focus on her words. He was watching a silent conversation happening across 15 feet of courtroom space. Emma's rabbit slipped down slightly in her arms. Not dropped. Emma would never drop her rabbit, but lowered, as if it wasn't needed as much, as if the shield could come down just a little bit. Shadow's tail gave the tiniest wag, once, twice. Barely perceptible movements, but Emma saw them. Rex was certain she saw them. The little girl's chest rose and fell with a deep breath. The first real breath Rex had witnessed since entering the courtroom. Her eyes, those haunted, empty eyes, seemed to focus for the first time. On Shadow. Only on Shadow. "Ms. Hernandez, thank you for your testimony," Judge Rivera said, dismissing the witness. "Mr. Chen, do you have additional witnesses?" Robert stood. "Your Honor, I'd like to call." That's when it happened. Emma stood up on her chair. The movement was so sudden, so unexpected, that Sarah gasped audibly. Linda reached out instinctively to steady the child, but Emma wasn't wobbling. She was standing deliberately, purposefully. Her small body was rigid with determination. "Emma," Linda whispered, "honey, you need to sit." But Emma wasn't sitting down. She was staring at Shadow with an intensity that made Rex's heart pound. The little girl raised one trembling hand, her finger extending, pointing, directly at Shadow. The courtroom fell into absolute silence. Judge Rivera leaned forward. Sarah's hands covered her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. David Patterson set down his pen. Every person in that room felt it. Something was about to break. Something had to break. Shadow's tail wagged faster now, no longer subtle. The dog's whole body seemed to vibrate with energy, with eagerness, with something that looked remarkably like hope. Emma's mouth opened. Rex held his breath. Everyone held their breath. And then, after 6 weeks of silence, after 42 days of emptiness and fear and trauma, Emma spoke, "Good boy." The words came out soft, barely more than a whisper, but in the absolute silence of Courtroom 7, they hit like thunder. 2 simple words, 2 syllables that shattered 6 weeks of trauma-induced silence. Emma's tiny voice cracked on the second word, as if her vocal cords had forgotten how to work. But there was no mistaking what she'd said. Her finger remained pointed at Shadow, trembling but certain. For a heartbeat, no one moved. No one breathed. The moment hung suspended in time, fragile as glass. Then Sarah Clark broke. A sob tore from her throat, raw, anguished, overwhelmed. Her hands clutched at her chest as if her heart was literally breaking through her ribs. "Oh my God," she gasped. "Oh my God," she spoke. Emma spoke. Robert Chen grabbed Sarah's arm, trying to steady her as she half rose from her seat. Tears streamed down the attorney's face too. He couldn't help it. The young lawyer had seen his client fight so hard for this moment, and now it was real. It was actually happening. Judge Rivera's hand pressed against her own mouth, her eyes glistening. In 20 years on the bench, she'd witnessed countless moments of drama, but nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to this. She didn't call for order, didn't reach for her gavel. She just watched, transfixed. Linda Martinez, Emma's foster mother, wrapped her arms around the little girl from behind, steadying her on the chair. "That's right, sweet girl," Linda whispered, her own voice thick with emotion. "That's right. Good boy, he is a good boy." But Emma wasn't done. She took a deep, shuddering breath, and her voice came out louder this time. Stronger, more certain. "Good boy." Shadow's tail exploded into motion, wagging so hard his entire back half swayed. The German shepherd's mouth opened in what could only be described as a smile, his tongue lolling out. He looked at Rex as if asking for permission, his body quivering with the desire to move, to go to the child who'd called to him. "Stay," Rex commanded gently, though his own vision had blurred with tears. He'd been a cop for 12 years, had seen bobbies pulled from car wrecks, children rescued from abuse, lives saved and lives lost. But this tiny girl finding her voice through a dog, this was something else entirely. Emma climbed down from her chair, still clutching her rabbit, but her grip was different now, looser. The rabbit wasn't a shield anymore, it was just a toy. Linda tried to hold her back, but Emma pulled free with surprising strength. "Emma, honey, you need to stay," Linda began. "Let her go," Judge Rivera said quietly. "Let her go to him." Emma walked, not to her mother, who was sobbing 10 feet behind her, not to the judge, not to any of the adults who'd been making decisions about her future. She walked toward Shadow, each step tentative but determined. David Patterson, the state's attorney, sat frozen in his seat. He'd argued against this whole dog idea, called it a circus stunt. Now he was witnessing something he couldn't explain with legal precedents or case law. This was pure human, pure child, healing happening before his eyes. Rex loosened his grip on the leash. "Shadow, gentle." The command was unnecessary. Shadow knew. As Emma approached, the German Shepherd remained perfectly still, lying down, making himself smaller, less threatening. His tail continued to wag, sweeping the floor, but the rest of him was calm, patient, waiting. Emma stopped 3 feet away. She stared at Shadow with those haunted eyes that were suddenly less haunted, suddenly seeing something that wasn't the nightmare of Highway 99. Her rabbit dangled from one hand now, forgotten. "Good boy," she said again, this time barely a whisper but clear, so clear. Then Emma did something that made Sarah's sobs turn into a wail of mixed joy and heartbreak. The little girl reached out and touched Shadow's head, just her fingertips, gentle as a butterfly landing on a flower. Shadow didn't move, barely seemed to breathe. He just let her touch him, let her feel his warmth, his solidness, his realness. "That's Bella's friend," Emma whispered, talking more to herself than anyone else. "Bella's friend." Rex's throat tightened. Bella, Officer Martinez's K9, the dog who'd kept Emma warm that horrible night. Emma remembered. Of course she remembered. That dog had saved her life. "Bella kept you safe," Rex said gently, his voice low and calm. "Shadow is Bella's friend. He wants to keep you safe too." Emma looked up at Rex for the first time, really looked at him. Her blue eyes were wet with tears, but they were present now, focused. "Bella was warm," Emma said. "I was cold. Bella was warm." "Yes," Rex managed, his voice breaking. "Bella was very warm and very brave, just like you." Emma's face crumpled, and suddenly the little girl who'd been frozen for 6 weeks began to cry. Real tears, real sobs, the release of trauma that had been locked inside for too long. She collapsed against Shadow, her small arms wrapping around the dog's neck, her face buried in his fur. Shadow shifted carefully, adjusting his position to better support her weight, and simply let her hold him. Let her cry. Let her release everything she'd been holding inside. "My mama left," Emma sobbed into Shadow's fur. "My mama left and I was scared. I looked for her. I walked and it was dark and cold and I couldn't find her." Sarah stood up, taking a step toward her daughter, her hand outstretched. "Emma, baby, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." But Emma didn't look at her mother. She kept her face buried in Shadow's fur, kept crying, kept releasing the poison that had silenced her. "Bella found me," Emma continued, her voice muffled against Shadow's neck. "Bella stayed. Mama left, but Bella stayed." Those words landed like physical blows. Sarah staggered backward, Robert catching her before she fell. The truth was brutal and undeniable. Emma trusted the dog who'd saved her more than she trusted the mother who'd abandoned her. Judge Rivera finally found her voice. "We'll take a 30-minute recess. Everyone please clear the courtroom except for Officer Hawthorne, Emma, and her foster mother." The room slowly emptied. Sarah had to be helped out by Robert, her legs barely supporting her weight. David Patterson left silently, his expression troubled. Court staff filed out, dabbing at their eyes. Within minutes, the courtroom was nearly empty. Emma continued to cry, and Shadow continued to hold still, a living, breathing anchor for a child adrift in trauma. Rex knelt beside them, one hand on Shadow's back, not speaking, just being present. Linda sat down in the front row, giving them space but staying close enough to intervene if needed. She'd fostered 17 children over the years, but she'd never seen anything like this. Slowly, gradually, Emma's sobs quieted. Her breathing evened out. The storm was passing. She pulled back from Shadow, her face blotchy and wet, and looked at the dog with something that might have been the beginning of trust. "Good boy," she whispered one more time. Shadow licked her hand, gentle and careful, and Emma did something she hadn't done in 6 weeks. She smiled. It was small, fragile, and it lasted only a second, but it was real. Rex felt something shift in the universe. This little girl was going to be okay. It would take time, therapy, patience, and love, but she was going to be okay. Behind them, hidden in the gallery, Judge Margaret Rivera watched through the door's window. She'd sent everyone away, but she couldn't leave herself. She had to witness this miracle, had to see healing begin. And as she watched Emma smile at Shadow, Margaret knew her decision was already made. The question wasn't whether Emma would return to Sarah. It was how to create a path forward that kept this child safe while giving her mother a chance to prove herself. But that would come later. Right now, in this moment, all that mattered was that Emma Clark had found her voice. And she'd found it through 2 simple words. Good boy. Judge Rivera's chambers felt smaller than usual with 8 people crammed inside. Emma sat on the leather couch, Shadow's head resting in her lap, her small fingers gently stroking his ears. The little girl hadn't stopped touching the dog since her breakthrough, as if she feared he might disappear like Bella had that night. Rex stood nearby, leash in hand but unnecessary. Shadow wasn't going anywhere. Linda sat beside Emma, protective but giving the child space. Sarah had been allowed in, but only after Dr. James Chen arrived to monitor Emma's responses. Robert Chen and David Patterson occupied opposite corners like boxers between rounds, and Judge Rivera sat behind her massive oak desk, trying to make sense of what they'd all just witnessed. "Dr. Chen," Margaret began, her voice still shaky from emotion, "help me understand what just happened out there." The psychologist adjusted his glasses, his expression thoughtful. What we witnessed was a breakthrough triggered by environmental stimulus, specifically, the presence of a dog similar to the one Emma encountered during her traumatic event. The brain, especially a young brain under extreme stress, can compartmentalize memories. Emma likely associated the K9 with safety and survival. Shadow's presence created a safe space for her to access those locked memories. "But she spoke," Sarah interjected from her corner, her voice desperate. "She spoke for the first time. That means she's healing, right? That means—" "Ms. Clark," Dr. Chen said gently, "your daughter speaking is progress, yes, but what she said is equally important as the fact that she said it." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what Emma had said. Mama left, Bella stayed. Rex cleared his throat. "Your Honor, if I may. After the recess, I made some calls. I spoke with Officer Lisa Martinez. She was first on scene the night Emma was found. I need to share what she told me." "Go ahead, officer." Rex pulled out his phone, reading from notes he'd hastily typed. Officer Martinez arrived at 1:53 a.m., approximately 6 minutes after the trucker called 911. Emma was sitting on the highway shoulder, unresponsive. Lisa retrieved her K9 Bella from the patrol car. The moment Bella approached, something changed. Lisa says Emma didn't speak or move, but she leaned into Bella. The dog laid down beside Emma and remained there for 23 minutes until paramedics arrived. Dr. Chen nodded vigorously. That physical contact, that warmth, likely saved her life. Hypothermia was setting in. But beyond the physical, Bella provided something Emma desperately needed: unconditional presence. The dog didn't judge, didn't ask questions, didn't have expectations. She just stayed. "Unlike her mother," David Patterson said quietly. There was no malice in his voice, just sad truth. Sarah flinched but didn't argue. What could she say? It was true. "There's more," Rex continued. Lisa mentioned something she'd forgotten to include in her initial report. She was so focused on Emma's medical condition that she didn't think it was relevant at the time. But now, He paused, looking at Emma, who was watching him with those newly awakened eyes. Lisa said that after about 15 minutes, Emma whispered something, just once. Lisa almost didn't hear it. What did she say? Margaret leaned forward. She said, "Good dog." The revelation hit like a physical force. Emma's first words after being found, words no one had documented, words lost in the chaos of sirens and medical emergencies, were the same words she'd spoken today. Good boy, good dog, not mama, not help, not scared. Just recognition and gratitude for the creature that had given her warmth when the world had gone cold. Emma spoke up suddenly, her voice small but clear. Bella had soft fur like my rabbit. She held up her threadbare stuffed animal. Bella was warm and soft, and she didn't leave me. The parallel was devastating. Emma had clung to that rabbit for 6 weeks the same way she'd clung to Bella that night, desperate for something constant, something that wouldn't abandon her. Dr. Chen knelt in front of Emma, careful not to crowd her. "Emma, can you tell me about that night, about when you were looking for your mama?" Emma's fingers tightened in Shadow's fur, but she didn't retreat into silence. "I woke up and Mama was gone. I called her, but she didn't come. The apartment was dark. I was scared." Her voice was matter-of-fact, as if she were recounting a story that had happened to someone else. "I thought maybe Mama went to the store. Sometimes she went to the store." Sarah's sob was muffled by her hand pressed against her mouth. "So I went to find her," Emma continued. "But it was dark outside too, and cold. My feet hurt. I walked and walked, but I couldn't find her. Cars went really fast. The lights were really bright. I was cold and my feet hurt and I was scared." "What happened then, Emma?" Dr. Chen's voice was infinitely gentle. "I sat down. I was too tired, too cold. I thought maybe I would sleep and then Mama would find me." Emma looked up at the psychologist with ancient eyes. "But then Bella came. The nice lady brought Bella, and Bella was warm. She laid down with me and I wasn't cold anymore. I waited for Mama, but Bella stayed instead." The silence in the room was deafening. Judge Rivera felt tears sliding down her cheeks, not bothering to hide them. This child, this brave, traumatized, resilient child, had nearly frozen to death waiting for a mother who was high in someone else's apartment. And a police dog had saved her, had given her the warmth and presence her own mother couldn't provide. "Emma," Margaret said softly, and the little girl looked at her. "Do you want to see your mama, not live with her yet, but see her?" Emma's gaze shifted to Sarah for the first time since entering the chambers. Sarah held her breath, her whole body trembling with desperate hope. "Mama left me," Emma said simply. "Bella stayed, Shadow stayed." She paused, thinking with the straightforward logic of a 3-year-old. "If Mama promises not to leave again, maybe I could see her, but Shadow has to come too." It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't trust, but it was a beginning. Rex felt his heart break and heal simultaneously. This little girl who'd survived the unsurvivable was willing to try, willing to give her mother a chance, but only with a safety net, a 4-legged guardian angel to make sure she was never alone again. Sarah slid from her chair to her knees, overwhelmed. "I promise, baby, I promise I'll never leave you again. Never. I'll do anything. Take any test, attend any program, see any therapist. I'll prove I can be the mama you deserve." Emma didn't respond, just continued petting Shadow, drawing strength from his solid, steady presence. Judge Rivera looked at Dr. Chen. "What do you recommend?" "Supervised visits, initially with Officer Hawthorne and Shadow present. Emma has made Shadow a security object, a bridge between her trauma and her healing. If Sarah truly wants to rebuild this relationship, she needs to respect that Emma's trust must be earned one visit at a time." Margaret nodded slowly. She'd been a judge long enough to know that family court rarely had perfect solutions, only least harmful options. But this felt like possibility, like a door opening rather than closing. "Here's my ruling," Margaret said, her voice regaining its judicial authority. "Emma remains in foster care with Linda Martinez for a minimum of 6 months. Sarah Clark will have supervised visits twice weekly, with Officer Hawthorne and Shadow present for the first 2 months. Emma's therapy continues with Dr. Chen. Sarah continues her recovery program, submits to random drug testing, and attends parenting classes specifically focused on trauma-informed care. She looked at Rex. "Officer Hawthorne, I'm asking something unusual of you and Shadow. Are you willing to commit to this family's healing process?" Rex didn't hesitate. He looked down at Emma, at her small hand buried in Shadow's fur, at the trust beginning to bloom in her eyes. "Yes, Your Honor. We're in this for as long as Emma needs us." Shadow's tail thumped against the floor, as if sealing the promise. "Then we have a path forward," Margaret said. "Not perfect, but possible, and sometimes possibility is enough." 6 months changed everything. The first visit was held in a supervised visitation room at the Family Justice Center, neutral territory with soft furniture, children's books, and toys scattered across the floor. Sarah arrived 20 minutes early, her hands shaking so badly she could barely sign in. Rex and Shadow were already there, the German Shepherd lying calmly on a mat in the corner. When Emma entered with Linda, she immediately went to Shadow, ignoring her mother completely. Sarah's face crumpled, but Dr. Chen had warned her this would happen. Trust wasn't rebuilt in a day. "Hi, baby girl," Sarah whispered from across the room. Emma looked up briefly, then returned her attention to Shadow. "Good boy," she murmured, her new mantra, her anchor. That first visit lasted 20 minutes. Sarah sat 10 feet away, talking softly about nothing important: the weather, a bird she'd seen, the color of Emma's dress. Emma never responded, but she didn't hide either. Progress, Dr. Chen called it. Baby steps toward healing. The second visit went better. Emma allowed Sarah to sit closer. The third visit, Emma showed Sarah a drawing she'd made, a picture of a dog with Shadow written in wobbly letters that Linda had helped her spell. By the fourth visit, Emma spoke directly to her mother for the first time. "Shadow is my friend." "He's a very good friend," Sarah replied, tears streaming down her face. "The best friend." Week by week, inch by inch, the distance between mother and daughter shrank. Shadow remained the bridge, the constant that made Emma feel safe enough to risk trusting again. Rex sat quietly during these visits, reading case files or just watching, marveling at his dog's intuitive understanding of what Emma needed. By month 3, Emma asked a question that made Sarah's heart stop. "Mama, why did you leave me?" Dr. Chen had prepared Sarah for this moment, the truth, age-appropriate but honest. "I was sick, baby. I made very bad choices because I was sick. But I'm getting better now, and I promise, I swear to you, I will never ever leave you like that again." "Were you sick like when I had a cold?" "Different kind of sick, sick in my brain. But I take medicine now, and I talk to a doctor, and I'm learning how to be a better mama." Emma considered this, her 3-year-old mind processing complex adult failure. Shadow takes medicine sometimes too. Rex gives him pills and cheese. Sarah laughed through her tears. "Just like that, baby, just like that." Month 4 brought a breakthrough. Emma climbed into Sarah's lap during a visit. She stayed there for only 30 seconds before scrambling back to Shadow, but 30 seconds was enough. Sarah held that memory like precious gold. By month 5, Linda reported that Emma talked about her mama at bedtime, asked when she could see her again, wondered if maybe, someday, she could go home. The word home meant Sarah's apartment now, not just Linda's house. It meant possibility. Month 6 arrived with Seattle's spring rain and cherry blossoms. Judge Rivera reviewed the case files in her chambers. 14 consecutive clean drug tests from Sarah, glowing reports from her therapist, perfect attendance at NA meetings, stellar evaluations from her employer. Dr. Chen's assessment showed remarkable progress in Emma's trauma recovery. The supervised visits had evolved. Shadow's presence was still required. But Emma now spent entire sessions with her mother, laughing, playing, being a child again. I'm recommending graduated reunification, Dr. Chen told the court at the 6-month hearing, beginning with weekend visits, progressing to full custody over the next 3 months, with continued therapy and monitoring. Judge Rivera looked at Emma, who sat in the gallery holding Sarah's hand on one side and petting Shadow on the other, literally bridging her past and future. Emma, do you want to spend weekends with your mama? Emma nodded, then remembered to use her words. Dr. Chen was always reminding her to use her words. Yes, but can Shadow visit sometimes too? Everyone looked at Rex. He smiled. Shadow and I are free most Sundays. We'd be happy to visit. The graduated reunification began that weekend. Sarah's apartment had been transformed. Emma's room painted pink with a border of dogs around the ceiling, courtesy of Sarah's new sponsor who was a painter. Toys arranged on shelves. A nightlight that projected stars on the ceiling. And on Emma's bed, a new stuffed German Shepherd that looked remarkably like Shadow, a gift from Rex. The first overnight visit was terrifying for both mother and daughter. Emma woke up at 2 a.m., panicked, checking to make sure Sarah was still there. Sarah, who hadn't slept at all, was sitting in the hallway outside Emma's room, standing guard, proving through presence that she would never leave again. 3 months later, Emma moved home permanently. The transition was rocky. There were nightmares, setbacks, moments when Emma regressed into silence, but Sarah remained steady, clean, present, fighting for her daughter the way she'd never fought for herself. Rex and Shadow became Sunday regulars at the Clark apartment. They'd arrive around noon, and Emma would squeal "Shadow," loud enough for the whole building to hear. They'd spend the afternoon at the park, Emma running with Shadow, Sarah watching with wonder at the child who'd been silent now laughing so loud it echoed. On Emma's 5th birthday, the apartment overflowed with people. Linda and her foster family, Dr. Chen and his wife, Officer Lisa Martinez, who'd finally gotten to meet the little girl she'd saved, bringing Bella, Robert Chen, who'd become almost family. Even David Patterson stopped by, the hardened state attorney bringing a stuffed rabbit to replace the threadbare one Emma still carried. And Rex and Shadow, of course, always Rex and Shadow. Sarah stood in her small kitchen frosting a homemade cake, chocolate with pink flowers, Emma's favorite, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace, pride, purpose. Emma ran up, breathless from playing with Shadow. "Mama, can Shadow have cake too?" "Dogs can't eat chocolate, remember, but I made him special dog treats. Because he's a good boy." "The best boy," Sarah agreed, kissing her daughter's forehead. "He saved you, baby girl. He saved both of us." That night, after everyone left and Emma was asleep, Sarah stood in her daughter's doorway just as she had that first overnight visit. But this time, she wasn't standing guard against her own failure. She was standing in gratitude for second chances, for police dogs who understood more than humans sometimes did, for a little girl brave enough to speak 2 words that changed everything. "Good boy," Sarah whispered into the darkness, thinking of Shadow, thinking of Bella, thinking of all the angels, human and canine, who'd refused to give up on a broken mother and her silent child. In Emma's room, the little girl slept peacefully, one arm wrapped around her new stuffed German Shepherd, the old rabbit tucked safely nearby. She was home, she was safe, she was healing. And somewhere across the city, in Rex Hawthorne's small apartment, Shadow slept too, a hero in a dog's body, dreaming whatever heroes dream, his work complete but his friendship forever. Some miracles, Emma had learned, have 4 legs and fur. Some angels answer to good boy. And sometimes, just sometimes, 2 simple words can rebuild a world. The end.